the ahisma, the nonviolence towards animals, in the context of the society that was using it, cattle especially were used not for meat, but for transportation, traction, and manure. And so by not killing them, they were also very expensive to keep, and so slaughtering them was a waste of your investment. And so the ahisma, this religious doctrine, put the power of organized religion behind the command not to destroy this valuable resource. So I talked a little bit just now about cosmology and how religion can be used to sort of justify certain social concepts. And this is what Karl Marx was getting at when he said that religion is the opiate of the masses. So ideology is a way that justifies sometimes injustices. And so the religion can affect action. It can lull people into inaction. It can also mobilize people towards action by doing things like instilling hatred and fear. So witch hunts, for instance, are often directed at things like socially marginal or anomalous, non-normative individuals in a society. And many religions have a formal code of ethics or morality that prohibits certain types of behavior while promoting others, and this can channel people towards certain practices, but then punish people that don't follow those practices. So all societies have some sort of religious figures or magico, religious specialists of some sort. And these tend to be organized according to what type of society we're talking about. So going back to our earlier lessons, foraging societies tend to have part-time religious specialists. They don't do this all the time, but they are regarded to be shamanistic. They perform religious and healing ceremonies. They offer sometimes wisdom. But they don't do this for their full-time employment. That because in a foraging society, everybody has to pitch in with the economic aspects as well. Societies that produce food, like agriculture or trading societies, can support full-time religious specialists. And so you have priests that is their sole job, and they get rewarded for doing that sort of activity, that sort of job. Many non-industrial states had polytheistic religions that mirrored their social organization and had pantheons that each deity had its own specialized function that was dedicated to a particular aspect of society. So in ancient Greece, you had the goddess of the hearth, which was for households. You had the king of the gods, who was who dominated everything else, and also reinforced the masculinity and the patriarchy of that society. You had gods for having fun and drinking wine. You had Bacchus. You had Dionysus. We're talking Greek here. So anyway, different aspects of society were fulfilled by different specialized functional deities. And in monotheistic religions like Christianity, Islam, a single, eternal, omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-everywhere being is there. But as I said, this it can be interpreted in different ways in different societies, and in the case of things like Christianity, the role of these specialized functional gods in a polytheistic religion was taken up by saints that have individual aspects to them. So there's only one God in Christianity, but the saints are doing all the functions of different gods. And the type of religion can also either be both reflected in and reflected by the society that's using it. So, for instance, Max Weber, whom we've seen before, linked capitalistic values to Protestantism. And this is where we get the concept of the Protestant, so-called Protestant work ethic, that that religious leaders emphasize the virtues of becoming independent, entrepreneurial, hardworking, and future-oriented, which reflected some of the aspects of the Protestant religion, which was an individual's relationship with their God. Whereas Catholics placed their emphasis on immediate happiness and security, and salvation was only attainable through a priest, an intercession of a priest who mediates that relationship with God on your behalf. And that does not, those values, Max Weber saw, didn't fit in industrial economy where you're supposed to accumulate capital and be entrepreneurial and act on your own. So, the world religions today, just as a sort of a general scope and outline, Christianity is the world's largest religion, but there are many different sects. There are many different types of Christianity. Islam is the second largest, but believe it or not, about 1.1 billion people lack any religious affiliation at all, which would make that the third largest group worldwide. Islam is the fastest growing religion, and growth in Christianity, for instance, varies depending on what type of Christianity you're talking about. So, worldwide religions also have to deal with internalizing some of these social concepts into the broader identity. And so, like I said before, Christianity in one place is not necessarily the Christianity in another place. But also, these large religions, when they come into contact with different communities, the way that globalization deals with this acculturation process can vary. One very interesting concept is what we refer to as cargo cults. And this is when a very large-scale, powerful culture like Western European and American cultures come into contact with very small-scale island communities in the Pacific, like Vanuatu, which the scale is so separated from one another that the concepts of what we're dealing with are hard to grasp. And so this has been documented in real time that when planes were flying in and reaching some of these very remote islands in the Pacific, when they landed, the local inhabitants considered the people that would come there as gods. So Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen of the UK's husband, is actually considered a god in some places. And their ritual behaviors mimic the activities of the British soldiers that first came into contact with them. And so they recreate British military outfits from the first part of the 20th century with reeds and mats and basket hat sort of things, and long rifles that they put on their arms, and they march. And that's the ceremony because they're copying what they saw in this very imbalanced relationship. And they wait one day for the gods to return and bring cargo to them as gifts that they once had and they expect to have again. And so this is what we call cargo cults. And it's a way where cultural syncretisms, as we call, which are cultural mixes, including blends of religion that emerge when two or more cultural traditions come into contact. We also have, because of globalization, we have a blend and a mixture. All you have to do is go to California and you'll see New Age and alternative religious movements that grew from the 1960s and 70s onwards. And these appropriate ideas, themes, symbols, and ways of life from a variety of religious practices, from Native Americans, Australian Aborigines, Buddhists, things that aren't necessarily from the traditions of the people practicing them, but are incorporated from these different globalized cultures. Now, these are often strongly protested by the groups that are being appropriated. Native American groups, Australian groups take great offense sometimes at these cultural appropriations in spiritualist movements. And you also have, as I mentioned before, atheists, which are non-believers in any god, or agnostics, ones who don't know whether there is a god or not, as a very greatly expanding population in North America these days. On the opposite side of the scale of atheists and agnostics, you also have a surge of evangelical Protestantism and Pentecostalism. Evangelical Protestantism is emphasizes conservative morality, biblical authority, and a personal conversion experience. This is the born-again Christians. And you also have Pentecostalism, which is what's called an ecstatic religion, where this is the religious fervor, dancing and music, and ecstatic, mind-altering states of consciousness just from movement and ritual activity. And Pentecostalism may be actually the fastest growing religion in history if you take it on its own, separate from other forms of Christianity. And it's widely practiced in places where people's circumstances are changing, because it's a way to actually deal once again with stress and an unknown situation. You also have in fundamentalism, the word fundamentalism itself means going back to the foundations. And so fundamentalism is what we call an anti-modernist religion. It's rejecting what the modern world is. And so fundamentalism asserts an identity separate from a larger group of people from which they came. And so fundamentalists are not mainstream religion. They are rejecting the modern world and going back to what they think is the true religious principles that the larger religion has strayed away from. They see the past as more ideal than the present, that the present is degenerate and has gone downhill, and they strive to regain that earlier purity by going back to the fundamentals. Finally, I'll stop by saying that these are all religions, but we also have secular rituals as well. And ritual-like behavior spans a great number of different aspects of our life. And they can also be involved in certain types of identity as well. So you may be a sports fan, for instance. Is there some kind of a cheer or a chant or a behavior or even clothes that you wear that set you apart from the non-fans? So ritual-like behavior occurs in secular contexts all over the place, and they are ways for us to acknowledge and identify ourselves and others as members of our group. It's possible even for secular religion or secular rituals to become almost sacred. Some fandom for sports and even music can be ecstatic rituals. I mean, all you have to do is look at old footage from the Beatles and how people were just swooning and fainting. So this strict separation between what we think of as recreational and secular and religion that only belongs in a church is false, it's ethnocentric, it's wrong. So ritual activity and the concept of ritual-like behavior spans religion, but it also spans many aspects of our identity straight across the board. Okay.